an ordinance to establish and adopt policy and procedures for sleeping in vehicles out of doors or in non-residential zones. Chief Hollyneck?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I bring this to you
You need to get some sun.
just a little bit. I need to get rid of my, maybe go without wearing my sunglasses a little while. I wanted to discuss, we've had an increase in the calls, people sleeping in vehicles, people sleeping outside of the city businesses. And by introducing or talking to you about this ordinance, or maybe adopting this ordinance, would help us manage this a little bit better. And what this ordinance is basically is saying is it's prohibiting people from sleeping in vehicles. And it's from like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And excuse me. And then it also makes it unlawful for people to sleep in tents or have their sleeping in tents, any sleeping bags, or just sleeping out in the open outside of city buildings. So that would include sleeping on benches, and then again outside of our city buildings. So this, and it does actually have some provisions in there where during Mardi Gras, they have y'all allow campers and stuff in specific areas at specific times. So those would be excluded. But this is strictly sleeping in vehicles throughout the city. It addresses city limits and jurisdiction for the police department.
Well, Chief, you answered some of the questions that I had
Okay.
are answered in the ordinance, like, for instance, kids sleeping in a backyard. I see that's allowed.
That is
But
allowed.
it says only 2 consecutive nights. We hope they don't have a long Labor Day weekend when they want to camp out in the backyard for 3 nights.
Well, and this, we took this ordinance from one of our neighboring cities that adopted this several years ago, and it seems to work for them. It helps them out. It helps them manage some of the issues that they were having. So,
So then I also see the sleeping in the vehicles under, that's the second page, 2A. Sleeping in vehicles described in A, allowed on any residential zone. And I'm thinking of maybe family that comes in an RV and they're, parking in your driveway. It says they can stay there no more than 14 consecutive days.
that is correct.
What happens if they leave for the weekend and come back and stay another 14 days? Or
And that is something that we can look at
I
this.
just see little things there. It's
Right.
a real good draft, but I just start thinking of these things. I don't even know if that's a problem, but I could see where somebody would say, no, I'm not living in that vehicle.
Right.
I'm just staying there 2 weeks at a time.
And that probably wouldn't even be much of an issue. That's not some of the things that we deal with, unless they were there unwanted, and that would be a completely different issue. That would become a trespassing issue.
Well, and then that says sleeping in vehicles. I don't even know if, say, a motorhome qualifies as a vehicle. Does it
And
make a distinction?
It does. It says unlawful for any person to sleep in an automobile, a van, a truck, a camper, a trailer, or other vehicle of any kind or nature within the corporate limits of the city or police jurisdiction thereof. And it says except in licensed or approved mobile home parks or trailer parks or campsites that are provided. However, that the provisions of this subsection shall not apply to self-contained units during the following special annual events. And I've kind of put those out as our Fairhope's Arts and Crafts during Mardi Gras, and then any other event that the city has that is specifically documented.
And what is the, I'm looking at the penalties for violation.
That would be-
I know there's a catch-all that the state has.
Right, and what this would allow us to do is to issue an MOT, a municipal ordinance ticket, and ultimately, it could be an arrestable offense.
And if you get an MOT ticket, you have to go to court?
You do, you have to come to court.
Council, do y'all have any questions?
My question was enforcement, but also looking at that, you know, the youth campouts, kind of, I don't see how that could be an issue. I guess kids sleep out in the backyard 3 days in a row, they can't do it.
I know that you
Which
can
one?
use,
Oh, and these are
But if
exemptions.
we say you gotta,
Well, it does, it specifically says exemptions on the second page, which are youth campouts, on any
But-
residential.
Not to exceed 2 days.
And again, these are, if we need to change some of the provisions in it, that's fine.
I think it
Like you said,
takes care of what
it-
of you're talking
it
about.
takes care of our major issues that we're having on a daily basis.
I like it as long as we got a way to enforce it.
Correct.
Do you like it in this form? Do you need to tweak it any? Do you
No,
like it in
I
this-
like it
in
the
this
way it
format?
is. No, I mean, I think this is fine.
And like any of our other ordinances, I mean, if we see problems as it comes along, we can always revise it as they come up.
Has our city attorney looked at it and make
He
sure
has.
that? Okay.
We do have protocols to help as well. This is just to address
This is
things
just
they
to get
weren't
them-
able to really enforce before.
Correct.
Well, I'm still, I'm gonna say it, and you may be thinking it, but, this comes up with homeless people. And, if they violate it and they go to court, I don't know how they're gonna pay a fine, and then they violate it again, and you put them in jail, and, I mean.
Well,
what
in
do you do?
situations like that,
Start putting people in jail for that? I don't know.
well, in situations like this, or in those particular situations, we do a little bit more. We're trying to help them get into an area or into housing. We put them in touch with as many people as, we have resources that we're trying to use for our homeless.
That's what
And
we-
for some of those who want that help, and then there are those who don't.
Well, that's what I've always heard, is there's several that don't want the help, so they're just not gonna be relocated, and I've heard they've been relocated, but they come back to Fairhope because they
Well, this
choose-
is
they
a
choose
little bit harsher. I mean, this is something, we haven't been able to enforce some of these issues because we didn't have the means to do it. This helps us at least push and go in that direction and try to help it.
We're keeping files and history also.
Yes.
So they'll know what the cause is and a little bit of background history, so others, if they talk to them in the future.
I think the inability to enforce anything is why you're
Right.
seeing a
Exactly.
growth in this issue. So I think we needed to do something. Well, I'm glad you taken initiative to move forward.
And I just believe that this is the first step in the right direction.
I don't disagree with it. I like it, and I think something needs to be done, but I think when push comes to shove, there's gonna be a certain population of people that no matter what you do, they're gonna still wanna live out in the open space on public property. And
No.
and I don't see where they would have the means to pay a fine, and then I guess if jail is the next step, I mean.
Well, not everybody wants to go to jail.
I hope not.
Yeah.
Council,
Jay, you want to walk this on?
I'd be happy
would y'all like this on the next agenda?
Yeah.
All right, Chief.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, Richard, Canadian geese population.
I hate to be the second tough subject of the evening, and this has been somewhat of a process, and I want, y'all got a kind of a memorandum that has some background, and I want to thank you. You have allowed me, as your Public Works Director, to expand my knowledge base in areas I never expected to, from pickleball to the knowledge about Canada geese. As you know, we have some beautiful public spaces here in Fairhope, and there is no doubt that particularly the municipal pier, North Beach, and Quail Creek has received a lot of complaints about the sheer number at times of the year of the Canada geese that are present there. And I will tell you, Mr. Peterson and I had the opportunity a weekend ago to play around the golf, and I can't remember if it was green 4 or 5, but it was covered in feces. You really could not make a 6-foot putt without a good chance of encountering an obstacle left there by the visiting geese. Just a little bit of background. One of the things that's important to know is at the turn of the century, the Canada geese population was nearly extinct and was protected. And a lot of well-intentioned folks selected some of the biggest and the best that were available and transplanted them to locations throughout the country. And they were very successful because when they found themselves living in an area that did not have natural predators, that as people started to spend more time doing lawns and things of that nature, and they were wildly successful. And biologists now say we really have two populations of Canada geese. We have the migratory that still do their thing. They summer up north, winter down south, and travel in between during the fall and the spring. But these resident geese do not migrate. They stay put year-round. For example, when you were kids, you probably wouldn't see any geese in the middle of the summer in Fairhope because they were up north, because that's where their migratory pattern took them. One of the other interesting things is that there is some behavior between these two populations of geese. Even though the resident geese and the migratory geese may winter, or winter in the same breeding areas, they don't intermingle, meaning migratory birds stay with the migratory birds, the residents stay with the resident birds, and so there's not any cross-pollination to try to get the resident birds to start migrating. And unfortunately, the resident birds have shown an affinity to have much larger hutches of young, and they start reproducing earlier than the migratory birds. So they have now outpaced the growth, even though both populations have had a successful comeback. Biologists from their 2013 report says about 13% growth in the population of both migratory and resident Canadian geese. Our problem here is not unique to Fairhope. There's an article attached to that memo from Denver, Colorado. I've read a plethora of articles throughout the eastern seaboard of community spaces having the same challenges. Mr. Linder, who is with our sanitation department, and I have met with multiple wildlife specialists and garnered information recommendations and things of that nature. The biggest issues that we have is that the geese are overloading the ecosystem that we have. They love the young sprouting grass, which the golf course is very attractive for, and they can denude lawn areas very quickly because they eat just the young sprouts, which is the replacement grass that's coming in throughout the growing season. Also, geese leave a lot of droppings behind. And when you go out to the beach after a large gaggle has been there, it's quite unattractive and potentially a health risk there as well. Getting to what are our options, what are our recommendations? A few things came through as reoccurring recommendations from methodologies of trying to manage the resident geese population. One of the biggest challenges that communities have is there is a tendency for public feeding. And when geese feel very secure in an area and have a readily supply of food source, they're going to stay there. Okay, that is just a known thing. It's a very thing. And every one of the biologists and those in the expert fields recommend that one, generally the material being, or the food being fed to the geese is not necessarily in their best health interest, meaning that it can weaken them, so bread, popcorn, things of that nature, and they recommend preventing public feeding. We do have signage presence. We have ordinances that do not allow feeding of wildlife on city property. But the reality of it is that there is a reluctancy in code enforcement and law enforcement to criminalize the act of people who think they are doing something good for the animals. And that's a tough thing. The other methodology that has limited success is hazing or harassment of the geese. If geese are in an area where they do not feel safe and secure, they will not sleep there, and they don't nearly like to hang out in a place during the day that they don't normally feel comfortable sleeping in. Passive is those things that cause the geese to feel uncomfortable or nervous. Lights that flash. We've had some success with that, but it seems to have a decay value, a diminishing effectiveness. We just reintroduced a bunch of new lights. That's kind of moved them around. We put them on mounts that are a little bit more vandal-proof. Other things that really are not an option are things such as air cannons, pyrotechnic sounds, loud music, and things of that nature, because they don't like that. But in a public park, that just really is not a choice. I don't think our visitors would like Van Halen blasting at high decibels throughout the evening down there and afternoon. As far as active, and we were contacted by a firm that actually has trained border collies that act as stalking animals. Now understand, this is a service that has trained dogs to act like natural predators to the geese, meaning it's not going to be a dog chasing the geese and feathers flying. They actually stalk the gaggle, and they become very conscientious of being stalked, and thus they leave the area. If this is done repeatedly, it kind of gets out to the group that, hey, there's predators present, we don't need to be here. We actually have a company coming in that's going to do a demonstration for us, and we're going to take some video of it, share that with you. We don't know what the cost is, but I'm sure trained dogs and handlers do have some expense there. But again, it's one of those things that you would have to have a repeated use of to keep the effectiveness present. One of the most successful programs is a mass relocation at the time of molt. Canadian geese are the only waterfowl that lose all their flight feathers at one time. So and it comes with the eclipse in June. And somewhere around the middle of June, they are flightless for about 3 to 4 weeks because all of their flight feathers fall out. The reason you saw such large numbers during that portion of June and early July in North Beach is they were stuck there. The only way that they could leave was to swim or walk. So they were trapped there. The recommendation of the wildlife experts is that when that time occurs, you have a mass roundup. They're safely and humanely handled and transported and relocated to an area such as private hunting camps that have water and woods and everything that they need, but also it has natural existing predators there. And there's a period of time that they're flightless, and there's natural selection takes place, because as soon as they can fly, they will come back. But this is an opportunity for nature to take its course and reduce the population that would return. And that would probably be something that would have to be done on an annual basis to keep the population in check. We have at least one estimate that service would be for the population that we're talking about in the two principal locations, North Beach and Quail Creek, about $7,500 for a mass relocation and they
And
would.
that would be how many, all of them essentially?
As many as can be rounded up. The only thing is Public Works people would actually, you just get a big group, and you just keep walking them into it, and then you can pick them up because they can't fly. They're bound by that. Do understand that that both the resident and migratory Canada geese are protected by acts of the Congress. So both the mass relocation would require permitting, but it is a permitted activity, meaning that the vendor that was hired, that was the professional wildlife management firm, would apply for the permits and all that. The other, and this one's hard to discuss, but I want to discuss it, is that Fish and Wildlife, as well as state agencies, will issue a permit to humanely but lethally reduce a given population by 25%. And that is on an annual basis. Again, that would be, if that was a course of action, again, a licensed, bonded, professional wildlife management company would be employed, and they would conduct a count to come, and that count would be concurred with Fish and Wildlife and state agencies, and then a number would be determined that could be collected and humanely disposed of. My recommendations from and plan of action is, first of all, is if the council feels inclined, a motion supporting that we enforce our rules that are already on the book about feeding. Now, I'm a humane person. I've suggested a 90-day grace period where we take that 90 days and use all of our social media tools, everything at our hands, to let folks know that, hey, this needs to stop and this is the reasons why. And that code enforcement and law enforcement during that grace period can reach out to those that enjoyed feeding the wildlife and explain to them why they shouldn't, and that on this date and beyond, this would be a ticketable offense. And hopefully we would be successful in ending the feeding of that. Again, I recommend that we continue with passive hazing with the lights. We just got a new order in, I think at the end of or Wednesday of this past week. We're going to keep moving them around and using them and trying to keep the gaggle spread out off of the public lands. And we're going to at least test drive the harassment dogs. And if we feel that that may be a successful thing, we would bring that back to you for a professional service contract to do that on an as-needed basis. I do think that with the population that we're dealing with, that at least in the short term, because we can get it permitted, is hire a licensed wildlife management firm. That would require a council resolution because it would probably be more than $2,500, and apply for a permit to lethally reduce the current gaggle by 25% in a pretty immediate process. Again, using the same licensed wildlife management firm, plan for and request permit for a mass relocation this time next year when the eclipse molt occurs, which would be somewhere in the middle of June. We've kind of missed it. They started flying again, so we know that window of opportunity. And then our responsibility to you would be, as a continuing management plan, make sure that we budgetarily plan for this, ongoing contingencies, to use these various methodologies to do this. I do want to say that you know, I don't mind talking the harsh truth here. These are God's creatures, and I think whatever we do, we got to be humane in every effort and not take it lightly. But we do have an ecological imbalance here, and just as when the state alligator population got to a certain size, started issuing the rights to go and harvest, and just as if there's too many deer in a certain area, they extend the doe season or they extend the deer hunting season. We're stewards of all resources, but we've also got to make sure that we balance everything that we do, and it's the needs, the health, and public welfare as well. And that's where I am. I'm looking for input and guidance. I know I met with the mayor on Wednesday, and she expressed her feelings about things, and you're not going to hurt my feelings by expressing yours, but doing nothing is not an actionable plan. That is not working for us right now. So I'm just looking for guidance and what your comfort level is here, and you know, I'm okay with me calling a bad guy on Facebook. Y'all pay me well, and you know, if there's a job to be done, we'll do it. So
We got it. Jay, any comments?
I mean, it's just kind of an odd, targeting harassment dogs and relocate, but I mean, it's got to be done. I don't know.
Is the molting, are they finished with that?
yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to verify, because otherwise we could do that and it could be done naturally.
I would, yeah, I'll lay all my cards on the table. I think everybody wants to watch these dogs work. I'm not that interested in watching the dogs work. I'd like to see a demo, but it's probably going to get expensive, and it's just going to move them. They're going to come back, move them, come back. I'm not interested in a plan that we have to spend thousands of dollars on every single year just so they can go back and forth. Secondly, I mean, the lights, I mean, we can keep trying them. I know that they're being stolen and vandalized, but it's inexpensive, but maybe ineffective. And then the same thing is with the dogs, they keep going and coming back. Euthanizing the birds, if you can only do 25%, well, you know, they do populate, you get 25%, well, next year, you can only take 25%, you may never decrease it, or it may take several years to do it.
And the gaggles I've seen down there, if you reduce it by 25%, it'd be hard to tell. You got 200 geese walking around.
Yeah. Well, if you take that down to 150, and next year you may have 190, and so it takes you 10 years. And while it may be something that we want to consider, at least to reduce what we can, you know, to me, the relocation, I don't know, it may be too late, but the relocation, to me, makes the most sense, and I think round them all up. And then you don't have 25% to deal with the next year or whatever number. You may have a few. I mean, there's probably going to be some coming back, but that's my thoughts, is round them up and ship them off and be done with most of it. See, James out there doesn't like it, but
We're rounding them up.
The audience agrees.
I think you take his head, no, what are we going to do?
It's a public health,
Okay.
it's a public health issue. I was there Father's Day, and
But I don't know what to do now. The problem is we're past the molting.
Right.
Well,
That's what I'm saying.
try the
We can do the
dogs,
mass.
try the dogs and prepare for the mass relocation next June.
Does anybody think the 25% reduction in population by euthanizing?
I just don't think that does,
Make much of a difference?
I mean, I think 25%
I
of
think the
just
political
doesn't do it.
fallout from just reducing 25% and its chance to come back is not too pleasant.
Who does the who does the rounding up?
The hired wildlife management company, and you probably
Is this
know.
through the conservation department?
Well, there would be licensed and approved by U.S. Fish and Wildlife and state agencies. So, and there are several companies. We have one locally that does a lot of removal of problematic animals, and they're very professional and do a good job.
Can we ask them if they can relocate them for $7,500 if that was, who gave you that cost?
That was Wildlife Solutions.
Oh, it was Wildlife Solutions.
Can they guarantee they're gonna be gone?
But that was while they were molting.
While they're flightless.
Can they guarantee they're gonna be gone? Since the little old bird can fly its way from Canada right there to that pond every single time.
He went through the whole,
Now, those aren't what you call migratory birds.
Well, they're going-
No,
Those are
they're
year-round birds.
They're resident birds.
I don't know what the
Yes.
tracking system is, but by and large, they can find their way back to anything they want to find their way back to.
The recommendation of the expert was that you go ahead and get everything in place, and you're watching for when the molt occurs, and you catch them as early as possible. So they're grounded. They're flightless for about 3 weeks.
Right.
They're all located to hunting camps up north, north parts of the counties north of us that have water and woods and everything they need. But there's also natural predators there, and they are susceptible to predation during the time that they're flightless. Because, for example, if you relocate flyable birds today, the comment from the wildlife is they'll beat you back to town. Okay, so you've got to relocate them when they're flightless, and you let the natural selection take place during that period of time.
So where does that leave us then? Council, I'm hearing that people like the relocation.
I'm fine with any and all measures.
So the 25% immediately?
Whatever could be done immediately, dogs, lights, Cajun Navy.
Anybody else?
I think the relocation sounds like the best option, but that's the next year option. In the interim, I think we should try for Aspen Dog and see what that does, keep the lights going, and then if we don't get any resolution from that in the short term, then we can.
You're gonna bring us a price back from the dogs. I'm just worried, if the dogs come back and it's 15,000, and they just, go to the Grand Hotel,
Out to
and
the bay.
then when they leave, they fly right back to our beach, which I think is the likely scenario.
And again, at least the demo's not going to cost us anything, so we'll at least learn what we
Maybe the
can.
experts will tell us different. Maybe they'll say that it scares them so bad they fly back to Kansas. I don't know.
Well, I think you
I
can
don't
get,
think so.
in addition to doing the dog, I think you can buy kind of a decoy dog that spins around after you've chased them off a few times. And
Public Works will make it
Yeah, I mean, I think they sell them specifically to keep geese off of golf courses.
I'll look into it.
And I think you've got to do
I'm gonna
the
throw my
harassment
2 cents
first,
in.
but.
You're not, that'll work for a little while.
Yeah, like the light, then they
The same
realize
as an
it.
owl on the pier or
Mhm.
anything else that does. They see it the first time, it scares them off, then all of a sudden these aren't, stupid birds. They do know, the dogs are basically a pressure system. Put pressure on them, and it creates an activity they don't want to be around anymore, so they leave.
So let me just kind of poll the council on all of these measures for giving the public notice and then strongly enforcing the no feeding. But who's in favor of that?
Absolutely.
Okay, we can do that.
I thought,
Yeah,
you said there's already signs posted though, right?
Yes.
Saying,
But there's nothing to enforce it if they do.
That doesn't
The 90
require,
90 day
that doesn't require the
grace.
council action, it just.
Well, but I did want your awareness
Sure,
because, I
sure.
mean,
Oh, yeah.
most of them
Because we're
are,
going to get the emails.
they're sweet little old ladies. I mean, and
I was down there last Saturday and some kid had a bag of Doritos, a big bag of Doritos, shaking them out as the geese were following them. And I said, hey, you can't do that. There's a sign right there. His mom was like, oh, we just moved to town. Sorry. And he just kept shaking them out.
they love Doritos.
Yeah.
I figured the seagulls would beat it too.
So hazing, I think everybody, I heard everybody say the hazing, they're okay with the hazing?
We'll bring in some information on the efficacy of the dogs.
All right, mass relocation sounded like the leading candidate for next year. And then probably the controversial one will be
Cajun
lethally
baby.
reducing the population by 25%.
And we're going to hold off on that.
Well, I was going to get a poll.
Yeah.
That would be
And
my.
and again, all of this
as a
is
last
checked out
resort
through the
for this year to
feds.
see.
Yes.
And if that's the
Yes.
permanent solution of relocation, that's fine.
That's the main thing.
Anybody else have an opinion on
I think you summed it up pretty
Right,
good.
that's fine.
the euthanasia of it?
It's just not enough of a dent. I mean, 25%, might as well just hold out and try and do the mass relocation.
Well, we'll work on all of those and keep you up to date. And just on
Get a
one of-
number in the budget for relocation.
Yes, sir. It will be planned for. And just to kind of reinforce just one of the things that Chief Hollinshead was discussing, unfortunately, we have several of our non-residential residents that tend to use our public bathrooms for their non-resident bathroom. And a lot of times when we do come in into the morning, they're nasty. I mean, and that's, that's always a difficult thing
Right.
too. So, and, just that there are downsides to the general public, to those that are residing without residences, so.
Let me ask you this, Rick. Assuming on the negative side, none of this works, geese will stay there for now, forever. The point of it is they have to come and make the messes at certain times of the year. So is there any money in the budget just to come out there every morning and wash it off? Clean it up?
I mean, we do that.
That'd be better than nothing.
Yeah, we do that for, again, when it gets real bad on the beach, we'll at least rake it. It doesn't really clean it up. It kind of covers it up.
I'm more concerned with the sidewalks
And yes, we do clean it up and wash it on a regular basis. So it's just part of what we do, so.
and that's assuming,
You don't like washing it in the bay?
I think that deferment is a regular
On the
basis.
weekends and holidays, I'm not seeing any cleanup, and that's when it's mostly used on the sidewalks on the South Beach. In particular, the sidewalks in front of the pier and the South Beach. A lot of people walk that, that's the walking path. I've never seen anybody wash that.
to the boat ramp is full of it sometimes. When you walk.
I think a lot of communities do wash those down there on frontage of beaches. That would help on the weekend.
All right,
Well,
thank you.
It would help. I truly believe in the fact you want to get rid of them, you have to get rid of them. And then they're still going to come back because they're coming to a food source and arresting over a period of time. The amount of lakes in the county that have, these are pets, these aren't wild geese, these are pet geese. And but you're going to continue to have this problem over a period of time. So the cleaning process, to me, if all else fails, might be a little bit more in order. Just look at and see what you do to take care of it on every morning basis during the summer or whenever they show up. It's like, say, they're not there every day, they're only there during certain parts of the year. And you don't see them. You don't see them all.
We can form a committee, people that have bird dogs, let them go down there once a week, harass the birds.
I'm not sure if they're trained to just intimidate. They're gonna be like, you
No,
know.
they're gonna grab one. They grab it, they're gonna grab it, bring it back to you.
Well, thank y'all for y'all's consideration of your time.
Thank you, Richard. You know a lot about geese. You learned a lot about geese.
More than I wanted to know. Thank you.
This was really good information. Thank you.
I tried to fish her, he didn't know either.
Next item is a presentation on the Young Street Community Park Plans. Christian Preuss.
Hopefully this will be a little bit more fun to talk about. My name is Christian Preuss, and I'm just going to walk you through this this process that we've been doing over the last few months for Young Street Community Park. Going through this presentation, as many of you know, the Rotary Youth facility is located on the site of this property owned by the city of Fairhope, and so we've been working with the steering committee and doing some civic engagement to formalize a plan. Right now, we're still at the conceptual level, but we're kind of bringing you up to speed on where we are. Just the context of the project site relative to downtown and everything else in Fairhope. There it is. Some of the major roads, Twin Beach there to the south, and then of course Young Street parallels it on the west side. Just a walkable context of where it is, a quarter mile and a half mile radius, 5 and 10 minute walks. You know, primarily undeveloped in this area, but you know, a lot of potential for development, as we all know, as the city grows. So seeing this as an asset for this area of the community is something the city is I think through previous studies has identified as upgrading this park to make it engage with the community. That's the actual site in aerial form. You see the Rotary Youth facility, which is a metal building that's been there for several decades now, I believe, and existing baseball field, kind of a multi-purpose court, and then parking on the northwest corner. This is just kind of our, as we started to look at spatial relationships and analyzing the site. This is hard to read at this level, but I'll just kind of take you through some of the site positives. There are playgrounds, a variety of experiences on the site for kids to utilize, open areas for free play, large lawn areas, and a usable multi-purpose court. Some of the negatives, some of the equipment is severely dated. Just the mass of the large gym-like structure on the property makes it not feel like a park. A lot of drainage issues. I said some drainage issues, but the people that work there day in and day out would tell you that there's a substantial amount of drainage that needs to be resolved. Lack of storage, as you can see kind of in that bottom right picture, just piles of picnic tables and soccer goals and things like that need to be a little more tucked into the site if it's truly going to be considered a park. And then the big thing that came out of this exercise and just kind of the interviews and engagement was just the park feels like it's exclusively for Rotary Youth, and it doesn't really feel like a community park. So that's something we wanted to address in some of the conceptual planning. So our general takeaways, severe need for better organization, vehicular and circulation elements need to be resolved. There's a lot of power lines that could be, kind of single power lines that could be located underground for lighting that would help clean up visually the site. The playground and safety of the site needs to be evaluated. There's some elements of the Rotary Youth program that must be separated with their pre-K program, so those elements have to be taken into consideration. Signage, lighting, and again, the main takeaway is making it feel like a community park and not a fenced-off area for Rotary Youth to use. So we've gone through a few months of presenting some ideas to people that work for the Rotary Youth, leaders in that program, and then city staff, Parks and Rec. And so this is us kind of going through some programming and ideas, just looking at a few precedents, some of the things that are currently out there that could be improved, and maybe some additional things that we've considered. Community Garden is currently out there, and there's some passionate people about that program, and making that more of an educational component to Rotary Youth, but also an asset for the community to be able to utilize. This is just an idea that we had for kind of a gateway into the garden. Just looking at some alternative methods of basketball courts that could be tucked into a park-like setting rather than the large, massive court that they currently have out there now. This is a circular court that shows that you can do 2 or 3 three-point areas for shooting. Some pavilion precedents. There could be this is one of the things that came up in the community engagement, is just the need for shade out there. I see this also as an opportunity to set an identity for the park, and again, just kind of draw attention to the park and not just the large metal building. Walkways. There is some, I didn't really point this out earlier, but there's a wooded area on the north corner of the site that could be utilized for environmental education, and so you could do a different type of walkway, maybe through certain segments of that. And then there's open areas where you could do more of a traditional pavement type. Playgrounds, again, I mentioned they recently completed a pre-K playground. In some of the earlier imagery, you see playground structures that we probably all grew up playing on, those types that probably aren't even street legal anymore. But there's definitely some newer, more interactive play components that could be incorporated into this park in the future. One of the things that was expressed is just the need for, not just for youth to be engaged with the site, but having elements of exercise incorporated along the pathways, where people could, while their kids are in the program there, or while they're playing at the playground, they could walk around the park and participate in these exercise facilities on site. This is an example of some facade enhancements that could happen on the principal side of the Rotary Youth facility that could make it more engaging and more park-like and aesthetically pleasing. This is a rural studio project in, I believe, Greenville, Alabama, just showing you that you can do something pretty neat with a metal building facade. And this is our plan that looks at the overall site and the potential there. Some of the big moves in the plan are really I don't know if this pointer works, but I know it doesn't on the screen. But as you can see, the parking and circulation is retrofitted to have a drop-off component. One of the things I noticed is the large parking lot that's in the northwest corner. Currently, you have to kind of walk by the front door to the Rotary Youth and almost feel like you have to check in to be able to utilize the park. And so by entering, having a one-way condition, entering in from the south, you have the potential to really set the tone that as you pull in that, hey, this is a park. Having a pavilion is that kind of iconic focal point as you enter from a vehicular standpoint into the park, and then compartmentalizing the site where you have these outdoor rooms in the front that include play areas, multi-purpose court, potentially some raised bed gardens incorporated into that, and then another larger playground to the south. There's also an existing pool house. This used to be the community pool for that area on that site, and so reconfiguring that into maybe some restrooms or a museum that tells a little bit about the history of that part of that site and that part of town. And then the walkways going throughout the site with some different uses along there with a basketball area, and then winding up into the northern part of the site with a interpretive trail that could wind through the trees and give them a different natural experience versus the rest of the site that's more open. And then incorporating, you see future additions on the northwest corner of the Rotary facility, and then one on the southeast corner. These were things that Rotary Youth, their program just is growing and very popular, and so they need some additional space in their facility to accommodate their long-term needs. So as we're planning a kind of a long-term vision for this public space, we wanted to accommodate their potential growth. So that's the conceptual vision that where we are at this point, kind of showing how that the site interface completely changes. As you pull into the site, you see that iconic pavilion that still fits in the industrial vernacular of the metal building, showing you a potential addition on the front of that facade that could house more admin or office space. It makes it a little more appealing visually, and then how the different elements of the park could be incorporated into this site. And we've shown this to the community. We had a great turnout for community engagement at the Rotary Youth. We had around 50 people show up for that, and really good feedback and ideas, and we have all that documented. We've also had about 70 people respond to an online survey that gives us some good data for the elements that people want to see in this park, and they're really excited about it. And I told them it was probably a 5 to 10 year plan, and they said, well, let's make it a 18-month to 2-year plan. And so they're ready to see something happen, and so they're really excited about it and pleased that this much thought is going into this park.
I think once you have something to look at like this, I think more people are going to want to fundraise. But some of the things we wanted to concentrate on are features that are not at other parks, because this, like all of our parks, are for everybody. And adding a full size basketball court is one of the things that we want to do here, because we don't have one, an outside court, in addition to the circular one when you could just practice. And the baseball field, the reason that's different, I mean, it's already there, is that's where they used to just have pick up and play games, and that's not really accessible right now at other parks.
Yeah.
So.
What is in the very front, kind of directly across the drive from, say, the front door to the left of the public gardens?
That was a playground. That was an idea for a playground. Now, we have talked with Rotary Youth about how their needs could be better served by keeping their playground areas up closer to the buildings, and so some of that may be retrofitted. But this was just to give everybody a general idea of what that could look like. So again, all that's subject to change based on kind of final planning and programming from the community engagement, but all these elements that you see will be included in the final plans. And so, in order to start to get the wheels turning to make this a reality, we put together a very preliminary budget. If you just take one and pass it around, we had just working off this conceptual plan identified the elements of the project and how those could be. We're thinking through how those could be phased in a doable way that the city can allocate funds per year to achieve those. We currently do have some monies available to spend before September 30th, I believe.
I think it's 70 or 75.
Yeah, it's around $75,000, and Richard and I have talked a little bit about that, and I'll let him kind of walk that discussion through.
Yeah, and I know that we asked Christian that if everybody got their wish and the vision, what would it cost? So this is
Everything.
Santa Claus came to town, what you know,
Building additions.
high end and everything else, and I think what the general consensus is from the city side is the public component is what we've got to concentrate on, and then work as partnership with the boys and girls to help on those parts that are kind of for their needs and things of that nature. One of our recommendations is that I'm going to take care of the engineering on the drainage. We've got a drainage problem out there, and our really first phase would be just some infrastructure improvement is getting some drainage out there. We've got a great area to the northeast that has a low natural wetland area that we can discharge to, and that will probably be a project that we'll get out on the streets. And we're thinking it's about $18,500, and it's probably one of those where we'll provide the materials, and we'll just ask for a quote for equipment and material to get that going to not only accommodate the needs today, but the future needs as well. And I think that's a good investment on city-owned property, at least to get the drainage working correctly. And then, looking at what would be the phase that brings in the first usable public improvements, playgrounds and that type of thing, with the consideration of how to ultimately tie the parking lot in so that there's adequate parking and things of that nature. And, we're going to at least spend some time looking at what it needs to be budgeted for in the next budget year and what part of this plan can be enacted under that budget. But this is kind of, if we were going to do it all tomorrow, this is what we think that those, and that's buildings, pavilions, everything that you see.
Questions, council? Comments? Anything you see missing? Don't like?
Not after 30 seconds, no. But it looks good.
The Rotary Youth they also have grants totaling 30, and so that's about 100,000 that we could do this year, but it would be phased. And having kind of a bigger picture, I think all the 3 Rotaries in the area fundraise to operate the Rotary Youth, and they've shown, the few that have seen this have been very excited about it.
What would you like to see in the next 12 months? Say a phase, let's call it a phase one.
Yeah.
But, in the next 12 months of a phase one and a budget, for that.
I think addressing the circulation in the front, like Richard said, the drainage and just changing that whole interface in the front where it feels, at least at the road, that it's open to the public and not partitioned off. Currently, there's a fence going right in front of that big green space, and you just feel like, hey, I don't need to be out there.
Like it's low,
Yeah.
a bunch of tree roots there.
Yeah, it's pretty, it's not attracting you into the site as it is right along Young Street.
And I don't want to speak, Christian, but I think what we're talking about, if you see the infill area and that's surrounded by the circulation and parking, at least the playground part of that and the circulation part of that would be at least a minimum of the first phase, because when you're through, you have a public park facility that's ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then just keep working around the campus.
So I haven't ever built a playground or anything like that, but the price, if I'm reading this correctly, is based on a per square footage. It would be a lot higher than I would have expected a playground to cost.
It always is.
There, and again, this is not
Substantially.
we don't have anything specified, or, nothing's been nailed down, but
This is all
some of the
conceptual.
surfacing goes, for probably $20, $30 a square foot, just for the playground surfacing. So you're dealing with in order to meet those requirements. And of course, you can go with lesser products, but for a facility like this, I would try to do as low maintenance materials as possible.
Jimmy, just to give you a comparison, for Fairhope's Park, the last renovation, I think we spent $432,000. May not be inclusive of that pavilion that we built. That pavilion on the south end was about $25,000 alone.
And
Call it 450, 460.
Rotary Youth's been talking with a playground rep. I do know that, and as they've been looking at fundraising opportunities and things like that, that may be something that they could allocate funds to. That would be an item that they could have their members, or however that works, contribute towards. I just know that playground upgrades are a necessary thing for that to fill out the public park.
I don't disagree with that at all. I just was
It is a big
little
ticket
sticker
item,
shot.
yeah.
And Ms. Connors, the good news is that when we get to that point, the playgrounds are scalable, meaning that and I'll tell you, the one thing I've learned is that the unfortunate aspect is a lot of the cost of that equipment and install. There's insurance and liability that is built into it, and unfortunately that's
Gotcha.
a leading component. But yeah, playground equipment today, because of all the requirements they have to meet for safety and all that, is expensive. There's no ifs, ands, and buts.
I would just lay it out there now, if we get to it in the next year, is that when we ask for, when we request proposals from these playground companies, it's like, what are you gonna give us for this, instead of, here's our budget, because it seems
Sure.
like when you put your number out there, you're gonna get the
I agree.
absolute bare minimum
Yeah.
of what your number is
Yeah.
every time.
I agree. Well, we'll continue working through this, and like I said, we're still at the conceptual level. Our next step is to, I think, a request for survey, topographical and existing condition survey has been in process, and so once that gets to a point, then we will fine tune our plan over that, and Richard will begin doing some engineering on drainage in order for us to hopefully be able to get that to a point before the end of the budget year, and get that part of the project started. In the meantime, we'll be identifying what that first phase is, and probably come back to you at that time in order to get some further direction.
You said that existing condition survey is underway now?
They're getting pricing on it.
You getting
We're
price?
asking for a response for
Yeah.
prices, so yeah. So we're gonna be bringing, hopefully, we'll have that. If we get it by Wednesday, it will be for the next council meeting, so.
We're gonna have to have that in order to do the drainage design.
Council, any other questions or comments about that?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, committee updates, Councilman Conyers,
No updates at this time.
Councilman Brown,
Nothing at this time.
Councilman Boone.
We had a harbor board meeting at 4 o'clock, Bellships Room on Wednesday. And personnel board met, approval of the Alderman study. I was sat in on that meeting, it was a very good meeting, very good discussion with it. And it'll be a good meeting. That's it.
Anything in particular on the agenda for the harbor board? Councilman Robinson?
I don't have any updates.
I don't have any updates either. Department heads? RJ?
Yes, sir. Just a couple of things, kind of hit the agenda. We did open both the 2016 and 2017 TAP grant sidewalk projects. That is item number 10 and 11. And I appreciate Kim, she took and she included in there, but kind of, I did a little breakdown of where we are on what we're getting reimbursed on, what is our impact to budget. I will tell you, and I don't know if he'll be here or not, but normally the TAP grant allows 80% funding up to a $500,000 total project. The segments on 13 and Twin Beach, when that budget was produced back in 2016, the numbers came in a little higher, but the total number is under 500,000, and we've already requested the state to maximize to get a full 80% back. And I did see an email that he got back that Tommy Goodman was working on that. So I did have a note in my handwritten sheet that's in yours that there's potential for another $96,000 in reimbursement on those two projects. And I will just state that if you note, item 8 is a companion item with item number 11. So if you're not going to do 11, don't pass 8. And you did have the fill-in for if you want to choose or to act on the assessment and inspection and reporting on the K1 Center. We did get response back to that today from 3 firms, and we've made a recommendation based on delivery time and price, as well as qualifications.
Let me talk about that. So that is item 6,
Yes.
council. So on that resolution, if you have a book, if you don't, it's watermark design, and the contract price was a not to exceed $15,000. I guess I'd like to get a little feedback. I don't expect this to hold up the closing of the K-1 Center. There's been a question whether, I mean, it's not contingent upon this inspection. We could back out, but I don't think that anybody's planning on doing that.
Well, and I'll be frank, and as I told them, I don't expect whatever the findings are is going to change our decision about that asset to be purchased by the city.
What are we getting for $15,000? I mean, that's a fairly substantial amount of money. I wasn't expecting anything so thorough.
I was actually expecting more.
The biggest thing is an overall structure evaluation of what's there with complete environmental, meaning what is asbestos, lead, mold, vector, all those things, as well as just a report on what is the status of electrical, what their suspicions are as far as what code issues, mechanicals, and things like that. Now, you're not going to get a report that says the air conditioning in room number B doesn't work because there's no power to the building and everything else. It is going to be, but it is going to be a complete assessment, inspection assessment, and report. And part of the RFP is that they were asked to be prepared to come and make a presentation of their findings to you in person, either at a work session or a special called work session.
Can we ask the school board to cut the power on for that?
I would be terrified, since when we were out there allowing them entrance, the feed that services the separate buildings to the north has been dug up and sold for scrap. So there's no electrical connection between the main building and the classrooms that are remote to the north. So the amount of vandalism that has occurred in that facility over the last period of time is incredible. I mean, incredible. When the school board got us keys so we could let the firms walk through and see what they were looking at, he had to bring a crew in the next day, and they worked a day and a half just trying to get the windows backboarded up and secured. So
It's probably too late, but I don't even see any reason to have a mechanical survey. I mean, I would assume it's going to be gutted.
Well, and that's what we specified, is we didn't expect them to bring in electrical or mechanical engineers to do it, but we wanted at least a assessment based upon what could be observed and seen. So.
So to make sure, this will be a complete structural assessment of the building.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Mr. King?
Good afternoon, Council. I certainly cannot match up with goose removal techniques, but wanted to really reiterate for the public's benefit and the Council's benefit, one of the discussions from last week's Planning Commission meeting was the desire by the Planning Commission to have a work session on August 5th, beginning at 4 p.m. to discuss the Greeno Road Corridor Overlay District. That'll be from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Then we'll have it'll be the first item on the agenda of the regular meeting, at which public participation will occur. And council members, you'll notice Wednesday I emailed all of the planning commissioners, gave them a courtesy copy of the slideshow that was presented during that July meeting. I asked them to provide any feedback to me by July 26th so I can incorporate those comments into that meeting. But council members, you're certainly welcome to reply to that as well. Absolutely welcome to do that. But for the public's benefit, just wanted to announce here today that we'd be having that work session prior to that next next planning commission meeting. Thank you, council.
Do you have any agenda items?
No, sir. No, sir. No planning items on tonight's meeting. Thank you, sir.
All right, RP.
Good afternoon. I have a couple of things. First of all, we had a pre-construction meeting for the Fells Mobile Street lift station, and just we're preparing a Facebook post or some other type of notification to the public. We will be removing a few trees, and we're going to be putting in a temporary mulch type walkway that will go around the construction site in order for them to have enough room for equipment and materials lay down. They're going to encroach a little bit on some of the property outside the scope of what will be the finished product, but in order to put a temporary walkway. We thought about putting something in the roadway, but then we thought there'd be cones or something that would be a problem, you know, for the duration of that project. So we're looking to do something temporary around the backside.
Not many Fairhope rubber pits that should come
Well, that was part of the problem. We didn't know how often we'd have to replace them. Excuse me. But we are working on that. And the trees that we do have to remove, we'll be looking at not relocating, but planting new saplings in places, and we'll work with Public Works to accomplish that once the project's completed. Rock Creek, I don't know if y'all's phone is ringing as much as ours are, but the 12-inch water main that feeds the booster station was put back together today. And, you know, of course, from the get-go, the deepest utilities, which were the electric and the gas, had to be, you know, repositioned and backfilled to protect those. And then we had the culvert system that the highway department had to extend once they got the power and the gas redone. Or we got that done, but then the highway department has a contractor that they use for emergency repair, and they've been in and they've now extended the culvert and have poured a concrete collar where the connection is to where the existing one was, which has now allowed us to get in and do the water main work. And, you know, in full disclosure, they finished that Tuesday. We evaluated what we were going to do Wednesday before the 4th and had the materials we were set up to use, and we were going to hit it hard Monday morning, which was this morning. And we had 4 other water main that were broke, and we've responded to several of those. There's still some that are shut off at this point, but we don't have any customers out from what I understand. But we do have the water main put back together. Tomorrow morning we're going to try to set up to put the thrust block in place. And we'll chlorinate and have it sit overnight and then try to get samples from it, and results of those samples 24 hours like we would any other water main test. That's probably 15 or 20. It's about a full, where that 90 blew out, it pulled the next joint going east out of the, you know, of the belt and spigot in. So that's where that is. And, you know, I hate that the pressure's gotten bad, and I hate that it's gotten so hot and everybody wants to water their yard too, because, you know, if we got some irrigation customers to voluntarily quit irrigating for this time, I mean, we may not have as bad a water pressure issue as we do, but there would still likely be some water pressure issues out there. It just wouldn't quite be as bad. And if they could do irrigation in the middle of the night versus at 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning, that would be helpful. But and we posted some information to the Property Owners Association and tried to get them to do that. And we just asked for their patience, and, you know, we're doing the best we can to get it back in order, if anybody asks you about it. The July 15th is the date of the Board of Adjustments and Appeals meeting, and they'll be looking to approve the substation site on Nichols and Young. I've written a narrative that explains how we got to that process, how we went through that process, and how that site works to our advantage to be able to utilize that for that. The following day, we hope to close on the property and hope to be clearing that shortly thereafter. So hopefully, if everything goes well, which I hope it will, we'll be moving on that project toward the end of next week. And last week, we bid regulators and breakers as part of our substation project. And there's a little bit of an issue now regarding the award of that bid. We had 2 bidders bid the breakers, and we had one of those 2 bidders bid the regulators. The low bidder for both of them was Siemens. Siemens is, you know, a world renowned manufacturer of electronic equipment. And apparently, from what I've learned today, is that we've actually had Siemens provide equipment in the past as well. But anyway, there's an exception in our terms and conditions that Siemens wants to make. And, you know, I'd like to be able to move forward. And Marcus, if you want to come over and talk about it a little bit, that's fine. But
I think what we're going to try to do is they've taken, we have standard terms and conditions in all of our bid packages, and they basically thrown those out, handed us a separate contract and don't want to use any of them. So we got to go back to them and say, here's what you bid on, and we can modify those somewhat as long as it's not a material change in the contract. But if any of them become a material change, we've got to remove it. There's also an option that we could do if it's a non-conforming bid, that you go to the second highest bidder and being a sole bidder, and you can negotiate with them. Again, they've taken our terms and conditions and just ignored them, so we've got to deal with that.
yeah,
They're on the state
I'm
bid,
sorry?
right? They're on the state bid?
No, they're not on
This is
state
the other-
bid. No,
Okay.
it's, now, I don't know how we work with other people that would do other state bids that
I
aren't
know.
required to be bid, but.
I think we need to look at those terms because it's
I would
delaying progress.
Think of it as, you know, that the terms and conditions are comprehensive to construction projects, to consultant type work, and then to vendor provided equipment or material. And I think when you try to encompass everything that's involved in a construction related contract and apply all of that into a vendor required contract, I think you start to look at where you can waive some informalities in what the original terms and conditions may have established for everything you can possibly think of under a construction project versus what we're talking about with receiving a piece of equipment that's manufactured off our site that is built to specifications that are within the guidelines of what we're asking for to start with, and have a warranty that comes with it once it's been delivered and checked. And I would look at that in one case as an informality that we should waive altogether, because Siemens is not going to change their position too terribly much to accommodate everything that we've got in our terms and conditions.
It ends up creating a ton of work on our employees. I cannot tell y'all how much time they spend on trying to get these to work out, because there's really no sense of how do we make this work. It's just, we can't do it.
If we don't want to waive the informality and award the low bidder of both regulators and breakers to Siemens, who is the low bidder for both of them, then we can take the A, B, and B bid for the breakers, and we can award it to them, assuming they're not going to want to change our terms and conditions. And if they do, then we can decide that the lesser of two evils is still the low bidder, and award it back to Siemens that way. But that's going to be a little bit of a process.
Mr. Peterson, I mean, did say any other, in any case, it doesn't have to be this case, in any case, is it possible that say the second lowest bidder, did they write some specifications per the terms and conditions of the contract? If they met them, what I see could happen, and maybe what Marcus was concerned, I don't know. You know, the second lowest bidder could then challenge that, the acceptance of the low bid.
That's why you can't just waive the terms and conditions. If you stick those terms
But
and
if
conditions
the
in there-
second lowest bidder has got the same set of conditions, terms and conditions as the first, then they really don't have an argument either.
Right.
That's what I'm asking. So,
And
I know every case may be
and I won't
different.
know the answer to that until we throw out Siemens' bid for breakers and award it to ABM.
You said
But-
one of them doesn't have both.
But if you look at it as an informality, and even in our own language, there are preferences of order by which decisions are made in terms of these types of priorities if there's a difference of what you're asking of the contractor versus what the contractor thought he was going to give you to start with. And the first item of the order of preference is if there has been a contract amendment before or after it was executed that was approved by both parties. I think, did you not read that, Marcus?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. The contract before, Because we had bid, or
No,
Seekers
our-
had bid
our-
on things a while back.
Our
and it's gonna
contract,
cost those.
our contract has language in it about an order of preference as to what determines what is right and wrong in any decision-making process that goes with a discrepancy or a dispute. And if you look at the paragraph 1.2 order of preference, the first order of preference, 1.2.1, and I'm quoting our contract language, subsequent modifications, and it's got in parentheses, change orders or amendments, close parentheses, to the contract agreement after execution. That's the first order of preference that you take in terms of what governs. And I'm just saying that if we make a modification to the contract agreement after execution, that fulfills
You don't have
the order of
contract.
preference.
You're talking about modifications after contracts entered into, and that's not what, you're still looking at awarding a bid to somebody who is technically non-conforming at this time, because they won't allow the terms and conditions that you put out in the bid package. You didn't put out those terms and conditions, it's a different thing, and you can go negotiate everything however you want to.
I'm just saying that in our own terms and conditions and contract documents that we want to hang our hat on, there are still exceptions to all of them. And I know there's a waiver of informalities in the bid
Terms and conditions
documents.
aren't an informality, though. I mean, I'd have to disagree.
Well,
with you.
I would say that they would be if the terms and conditions are relative to every construction project that you can conceive of, and we're talking about this being a vendor piece of equipment, we're talking about purchasing. I think there are differences in what those terms and conditions would imply for a contract for construction work to be done on our property versus a vendor-provided piece of equipment that would be built on the vendor's property and delivered to us complete, that we can look at.
Possibly, but there's some huge differences in the contract that Siemens posed to us, such as limitations of liability only up to the contract amount, those indemnity provisions, things that we don't ever do. We don't ever limit liability with regard to the products that they're providing to us.
I know, but
Those are some of the things that they've stuck in there that we don't have and that we're not governed by, and that aren't in the bid package.
This is a matter
But-
of consistently finding these things for general contracts. I mean, other cities are using them, but we can't. And we're not going to do anything about it. We just have to conform to something that we should look at and see, does it need to be this strict for certain things? I mean, it's very frustrating, and it prevents us from moving forward on almost anything. This is one example. But the reality is every department head faces this.
Well, it seems to me that whatever the problems are need to be addressed prior to the bid going out. Having set up terms and conditions.
Well,
Set
and-
the terms and conditions, but what you're saying, to the contract, that's fine. If you set up the terms and conditions, this is the way I look at it. You set up the terms and conditions, contractor can bid on this stuff, considering what I may, if it's a liability issue, I may put money in there to cover a liability issue.
and don't think they don't.
Yeah,
And
then all of a sudden
they
you
don't
take
wanna
that
deal
out.
with
Well,
Fairhope.
hey, if you're gonna take it out, I need to change my bid on it.
Well,
That's how they get it.
and I think we're getting too far off away from
Well,
the
my
point.
point is, what, you're discussing one, let's work on this in the future bid, I can understand that, but let's address what we can do concerning this bid. This bid's already put out,
Right.
bid on it.
And I
Bid on it
suggest
under
we,
certain rules and regulations, and one company wants to change those rules and regulations.
and I've suggested two options. One is to award the breakers to the second low bidder and see if we come up with anything different. And it's gonna cost us $35,000, by the way, more. And then award to the only other bidder of regulators at all is Siemens. And there's no reason for them not to have the opportunity to build those regulators if they're the only bidder, because we have every right to negotiate anything we want to after that point.
Right, but we don't know if it's truly gonna be $35,000 more with the second bid, because they might come in and say, look, if I don't have to follow the rules like Siemens does it, then I can do it for $40,000 cheaper. I
mean, we don't know it. We don't know that it's apples to apples
well,
because
no.
one person's following the rules and one person's not.
I would suggest these people looked at our standard specifications and looked at the equipment they provide that meets those standard specifications and gave us the price to bid it. I doubt very seriously that the salespeople that were working to prepare that bid looked at the terms and conditions as being something different than what they would look at under any other circumstance, under any other person that's bidding that kind of
It kind
equipment.
of just depends on how material those are. Let's say you have terms that says, all right, we're gonna order these parts, you're gonna build on these specs. The specifications are the most important part of all of that you're getting the parts that you need. The secondly, and I'm making this up. If you had a condition that said, and we have to have that part by October 1st, 2019, and that's specified in the terms and conditions, and one company A says, well, we just can't make that date, but this is our bid, and the company B says, well, yeah, our bid was based on making that October 1st delivery date. So I really think it depends on what those terms and conditions are and how material they are to what we're buying. If they're kind of immaterial, I definitely see your argument. And it sounds to me like you're making the argument there, those terms and conditions are not really material to what we're trying to accomplish, which are to get parts with certain specifications.
That's what I would
right?
suggest, yes.
One good way to find out. Give it to that guy and find out the other guy sees it. And then the judge will settle.
And I'm happy with that.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Johnson.
And running this, the problem is with our terms and conditions, we have a one-size-fits-all, and we're not allowed to modify that. There's no doubt that we want our attorney to make sure what is the risk to the city. But this is this simple. A company builds a product that we've put a specification out. They gave us a price for it. Our exposure is this. We say, you're to deliver this product as we specify. They deliver it to our site. Either it meets those specifications, it's expected and inspected and accepted, and then and only then do they send us an invoice that then we have to pay for it. Okay, so if the company doesn't deliver, we're not paying for it. If they do deliver it and it's correct and everything, we've got to pay for it. If there's any issue in the future with the performance of the equipment, that's covered by the warranty, which has nothing to do with the terms and conditions of the procurement. So we keep applying terms and conditions for somebody coming on our site to build an infrastructure project that's not applicable to buying a product that comes out of a factory somewhere. And that's what we've run into here, because, and here's the funny thing, that's not funny, but Siemens they're gonna walk away from a $500,000 purchase because in their world, that $500,000 doesn't mean a thing to them. Because they have attorneys that look at this and say, no, we're not agreeing to all these crazy things that we have in our terms and conditions. And
Are they crazy? Are they crazy?
For something that's being built off-site and delivered to us complete and whole that has to meet a specification, some of the requirements that you know, and I don't know if the fact that these companies want to insist if there's litigation in the procurement that it happens in their corporate headquarters county of their state, and we want to have it involved in Bay Minette, because really, I just don't think in this type of transaction there's ever going to be a lawsuit over a procurement. Either they deliver it, and if they do, and it's right, we pay for it. If they don't deliver it, we don't pay for it.
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the other. Who's the other country?
Well, I'm talking about
We're getting a little off the subject in the fact that I can understand we need to change it. I have no problem with that. And they do need to be changed, obviously.
And we've talked about that ad nauseum.
In my world,
I hate to tell
you award a bid to somebody else that didn't meet the standards I met.
We couldn't get a contract for the gas.
That's my word.
Yeah. And I'm not
I did meet these bids, and you didn't give it to me, and I got a problem with it.
And I am talking
Now,
about
whether
the
or
future.
not it's
So,
even worth suing it, and some of them do it for principle only. I don't know if they will. I just know that when you start changing rules after the bid, you got a problem.
sure.
If you want to change all this next time, I got no issue with it.
Well, I think the solution is I think that RJ and RP really need to sit down with the city attorney and try to come up with some language that's standardized to our contracts, and if it's, if there's some elasticity in there, then put it in. But if it's something that by state law, I know a lot of times we run this by state law, it has to be in there. I don't know if everybody else is just ignoring that and saying, well, I know that we have to have it in there, but we just kind of, and I'm saying other municipalities, maybe they just go, well, there's just no way we couldn't ever get business done if we have to get them to agree to this phrase that has to be in every contract in the state of Alabama. I'm suspecting that in some cases that is the case. They just go, it's never been challenged. It's not, we have no reason to believe it's going to be challenged.
I don't know.
I just wish we had a city attorney that could do it for us.
What do we do now? What he's talking about helps the future as far as y'all, everybody get together and take care of it, that helps future bids. What do we do now?
I think the two options are you waive that exception to the terms and conditions and informality, whether Marcus agrees with that or not, I can't answer that. Or you award the breakers to the second low bidder and see what their terms and conditions are, and if you gotta make exceptions to those or not. If you do, then you throw those out and go back to Siemens, which, is gonna take a little bit of time to accomplish all of that. But the regulators, there's only one bidder anyway. And I don't know why we can't
So
negotiate
you're
with
gonna
that.
have to go through them regardless. They're the only ones that bid on that item.
Right.
I think you have latitude on the sole bid, and I don't think you have as much latitude. I think if we can't change, if there's not a comfort level with saying these are informalities, then you pay the $35,000 and hope that they can meet our terms and conditions.
I mean, us not knowing what the informalities are, I'm not comfortable making a decision. I don't know, I'm kind of thinking, Jay, is this something you want to use your expertise on, kind of review maybe?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an answer right now. I don't think you can waive them as informalities. They are terms and conditions of the contract. I mean, they are as much a part of this bid as the specs to build whatever it is they were building are at this point.
But it's not a contract. It's not a contract. It's a purchase order.
And it's the same thing we use for every.
It's a bid.
Well, I get it. It's a bid.
We gotta change.
It's a bid. Two people bid on an item with a set of rules, and they gotta both follow the set of rules. If one doesn't want to change the rule, but it's a lower price, we want to meet those conditions, we may have a problem.
Was it a competitive bid or was it an RFP? or
No,
RFQ?
absolutely. It was bid.
It was a competitive bid.
It's a bid. You can call it anything you want, but it's a bid.
That's right.
And that's a problem.
Now,
Can you reject the
change
bids and
rules
then
after
go
the
back
bid.
with a less formal, less restrictive? Well, I know. But I mean, would that
And that may be the solution.
be the better solution? That's not one of the two offered, or is that a better option?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I mean, I have offered at least on 2 different occasions to sit down with whoever wants to look at these processes and refine them. And I'm still happy to do it, but nobody's come to me. I mean, I offered, once at a council meeting 2 years ago when we were talking about how restrictive the bid process was. And then again, when we had our separate meeting about 6 months ago. And again, I keep hearing about how the process is too burdensome, but nobody wants to sit down and talk about how we can change it.
Well, and don't take
Until
this
we
the
come
wrong
here.
way, but I think this is the first time I've heard you offer that.
I've never
And-
heard that.
Well, thank you for the offer.
I'll call you.
Thank you for the offer, thank you for the offer. We're
Yeah.
going to adjourn because our council
I'm
meeting
gonna
starts at
be
37.
up